A billionaire mistook an obese single mother for a beggar, and what happened next will leave you speechless. He threw money at her feet, humiliated her in public, but when he discovered who she really was, his entire world collapsed. A stolen identity, a hidden fortune, and a revenge so perfect it destroyed everything he built. Stay until the end, because the truth about this single mother will shock you completely. Los Angeles, 1980. The summer heat made the asphalt shimmer on Rodeo Drive, where the wealthiest people in California spent their afternoons browsing designer boutiques and sipping champagne at sidewalk cafes. This was the world of Jonathan Whitmore, 38 years old, heir to the Whitmore hotel chain worth $3 billion. Jonathan was everything you'd expect from old money, impeccably dressed in custom Italian suits, driving a silver Rolls-Royce, and treating everyone beneath his social status like they were invisible. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Jonathan was walking out of Cartier with a diamond bracelet he'd just purchased for his latest girlfriend when he saw her. A large woman, easily 250 pounds, sitting on a bench outside the store. She wore a faded floral dress that had seen better days, her brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she was holding the hand of a small boy, maybe 5 years old, who clutched a worn stuffed rabbit. The woman was Catherine Hayes, 32 years old, a single mother who worked 2 jobs to support her son Lucas. She wasn't begging. She was simply resting her feet after walking 6 blocks from the bus stop, catching her breath before the long walk to the discount grocery store 3 miles away. She couldn't afford the expensive parking on Rodeo Drive, so she always took the bus when she came to this part of town for her second job cleaning offices at night. But Jonathan didn't see any of that. He saw what he wanted to see, an obese woman in cheap clothes sitting on a bench in front of an expensive store. A beggar, someone who didn't belong in his world, someone who was ruining the aesthetic of his perfect afternoon. He walked up to Catherine with a look of disgust on his face. "Excuse me," he said loudly, making sure other wealthy shoppers could hear him. "This isn't a homeless shelter. You can't just sit here with your kid begging for money. It's pathetic, and it's making everyone uncomfortable." Catherine looked up, confused. "I'm not begging for anything. I'm just resting before I—" "Sure you're not," Jonathan interrupted with a cruel laugh. He pulled out his wallet and threw a $20 bill at her feet. It fluttered down and landed near her worn shoes. "Here. Take this and go buy yourself and your kid a meal somewhere else. Just get away from here. You're driving away my customers." Catherine's face burned with humiliation. Other people were stopping to watch now, some with their phones out, some whispering behind their hands. Her son Lucas looked up at her with frightened eyes, not understanding why the mean man was yelling at his mother. "I don't want your money," Catherine said quietly, her voice shaking. "I wasn't asking for anything. I'm just sitting on a public bench." "A public bench in front of my store," Jonathan said. He owned the Cartier franchise, along with half the businesses on this street. "I have every right to ask you to leave. Now take the money and go, or I'll call security." Catherine stood up slowly, her knees aching from the long walk. She was trembling with anger and shame, but she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She looked Jonathan directly in the eyes and said, "You should be careful how you treat people. You never know who they really are." Jonathan laughed again, a harsh sound that made Lucas flinch. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. You're nobody. Just another fat single mother who made bad choices and now expects handouts from successful people like me. I see 100 of you every day." Catherine took Lucas's hand and walked away, leaving the $20 bill on the ground. She held her head high, even though her whole body was shaking. Behind her, she could hear Jonathan telling the gathered crowd some story about how he was always dealing with beggars and how the city needed to do something about people like her. What Jonathan didn't know was that Catherine Hayes was actually Catherine Blackwell, daughter of James Blackwell, founder of Blackwell Industries, one of the largest manufacturing companies in America. When Catherine was 22, she had fallen in love with a charming man named David Hayes, who worked at her father's company. Against her family's wishes, she married him and gave up her inheritance to prove that she loved David for who he was, not for what her family's money could give them. For 5 years, Catherine was happy. She and David lived a simple life. She worked as a teacher, and then Lucas was born. But 3 years ago, David died in a car accident, leaving Catherine alone with a mountain of medical debt and a young son to raise. She was too proud to go back to her father begging for help after she'd walked away from the family fortune. So she worked. She cleaned offices at night and did bookkeeping during the day, barely making enough to keep a roof over their heads. But Catherine had a secret. When her father died 6 months ago, his will revealed something shocking. Despite Catherine walking away from the family, James Blackwell had never stopped loving his daughter. He had left his entire fortune to her, $60 billion in assets, property, and company shares. The lawyers had been trying to find Catherine to notify her, but she had moved several times after David's death, and they kept missing her. Just 2 weeks before Jonathan humiliated her on Rodeo Drive, Catherine had finally been located by the estate lawyers. She had inherited everything. She was now one of the wealthiest women in America. But she hadn't told anyone yet. She was still processing the news, still figuring out what to do with a fortune she never expected to have. She was still working her 2 jobs because she hadn't fully accepted that her life had changed forever. After the incident on Rodeo Drive, Catherine went home to her small apartment in a rough neighborhood 20 miles away. Lucas was quiet during dinner, pushing his food around his plate. Finally, he looked up at his mother with sad eyes. "Mommy, why was that man so mean to you?" Catherine's heart broke. She knelt down beside her son's chair. "Some people judge others based on how they look or how much money they have. That man didn't know anything about us, but he decided we weren't important because we don't dress fancy or drive expensive cars." "But we are important," Lucas said firmly. "You're the best mommy in the whole world." Catherine hugged him tightly, tears finally falling. "Yes, baby, we are important, and I'm going to make sure that man learns that lesson." The next day, Catherine called the estate lawyers. "I'm ready," she told them. "I want to take control of my inheritance, and I want to know everything about Jonathan Whitmore and his business holdings." It turned out that Jonathan's hotel empire wasn't as secure as he thought. His father had built the business, but Jonathan was a terrible manager who spent more money than he made. The Whitmore hotel chain was heavily in debt, operating on borrowed money and a rapidly declining reputation. Jonathan's lavish lifestyle was all a facade, maintained by maxing out credit and taking out loans against properties he was slowly losing. Catherine did her research. She spent 2 weeks learning everything about Jonathan's business, his debts, his enemies, his weaknesses. And then she made her move. Catherine bought the bank that held Jonathan's largest loans. She bought the investment firm that managed his remaining liquid assets. She bought the company that supplied linens to all his hotels. She bought the food distribution company that serviced his hotel restaurants. And then, wearing a custom-designed business suit that cost more than Jonathan spent in a month, her hair professionally styled, her makeup flawless, Catherine walked into Jonathan's office for a surprise visit. Jonathan's secretary tried to stop her, but Catherine simply smiled and said, "Tell Mr. Whitmore that Catherine Blackwell is here to discuss his future. He'll want to see me." When Jonathan heard the name Blackwell, his face went pale. Everyone in business knew that name. He rushed out of his office expecting to see some powerful executive. Instead, he saw Catherine. At first, he didn't recognize her. This elegant woman in designer clothes didn't match his memory of the fat beggar from Rodeo Drive. But then she smiled, and he remembered. "You," he whispered, his voice hoarse with shock. "Me," Catherine confirmed. "Surprise. Turns out I'm not nobody after all. I'm Catherine Blackwell, and as of last week I own your entire business. Your loans, your assets, your suppliers. Everything that keeps your little empire running belongs to me now." Jonathan stumbled backward, grabbing his desk for support. "That's impossible. You're a beggar. You were sitting on a bench in cheap clothes with a kid. I was a single mother resting my feet," Catherine interrupted coldly. "A single mother who you humiliated and threw money at like I was garbage. A single mother who turned out to be worth $60 billion. Funny how life works, isn't it?" Jonathan's face turned red, then white. He was having trouble breathing. "What do you want? Money? I'll apologize, I don't want your apology," Catherine said. "It's too late for that. What I want is justice. What I want is for you to understand what it feels like to be treated like you're worthless." Over the next 3 months, Catherine systematically dismantled Jonathan's life. She called in his loans, forcing him to sell properties at a loss. She terminated his supply contracts, making it impossible for his hotels to operate properly. She bought his competitors and offered his best employees triple their salaries to switch companies. One by one, Jonathan's hotels closed. His reputation crumbled. His wealthy friends stopped returning his calls. But Catherine wasn't cruel. She made sure that all of Jonathan's employees who lost their jobs were offered positions at her companies with better pay and benefits. She bought the struggling hotels, renovated them, and reopened them under new management that actually cared about workers and guests. She turned Jonathan's failing empire into something good, something that helped people instead of exploiting them. Jonathan, meanwhile, lost everything. His mansion was foreclosed. His cars were repossessed. His girlfriend left him for a richer man. He ended up in a small apartment, working as a sales clerk at a department store, barely making enough to survive. And every day he remembered the fat single mother he had mocked and thrown money at, never imagining she would become his downfall. 1 year after their encounter on Rodeo Drive, Catherine was visiting one of her newly renovated hotels when she saw Jonathan. He was walking out of a building across the street, wearing a cheap suit that didn't fit right, his shoulders slumped with defeat. He looked up and their eyes met. For a moment neither moved. Then Jonathan slowly walked across the street to where Catherine stood. "I deserved this," he said quietly. "Everything that happened to me, I deserved it. I was arrogant and cruel, and I judged you without knowing anything about you. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm truly sorry." Catherine looked at him for a long moment. "You're right. The apology doesn't change what you did, but I appreciate hearing it anyway." She paused. "I heard you're working retail now. How are you managing?" Jonathan laughed bitterly. "Barely. Turns out when you lose everything, you discover who you really are. I was nothing without my father's money, just an entitled jerk who thought being born rich made me better than everyone else." "You were," Catherine agreed, "but people can change. The question is, have you?" "I'm trying," Jonathan said. "Every day I remember how I treated people when I had power, how I looked down on anyone who wasn't wealthy, how I thought money made me superior. I was wrong about everything." Catherine studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but all she saw was genuine remorse and exhaustion. She made a decision. "I'm opening a new training program for hospitality management. It's designed to teach people how to run hotels ethically, how to treat workers fairly, how to create businesses that serve communities instead of exploiting them. If you're serious about changing, I'll give you a spot in the program, but you'll have to work for it. No special treatment, no shortcuts. You'll start at the bottom and earn your way up." Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that for me after what I did to you?" "Because revenge is empty," Catherine said. "I've spent a year destroying your life, and it didn't make me feel better. It didn't erase the humiliation I felt that day on Rodeo Drive. But maybe teaching you to be better, giving you a chance to actually help people instead of hurting them, Maybe that will mean something. Jonathan took the opportunity. He enrolled in Catherine's program and discovered he actually had to work hard for the first time in his life. He cleaned hotel rooms, worked in kitchens, managed front desks. He learned what it was like to be the people he used to look down on. And slowly, painfully, he became a better person. 5 years later, Jonathan was managing one of Catherine's hotels in San Diego. He was good at his job, genuinely good, because he finally understood what hospitality meant. He treated his staff with respect, paid them well, created programs to help them advance their careers. He built relationships with the community, making sure the hotel contributed positively to the neighborhood, instead of just taking from it. Catherine visited the hotel on its 5th anniversary. She walked through the lobby, noticing how the staff smiled genuinely, how guests seemed relaxed and happy. Jonathan saw her coming and met her in the center of the lobby. "Thank you," he said simply, "for giving me a chance to become someone worth being." Catherine smiled. "You gave yourself that chance. I just provided the opportunity. You did the work." They talked for a while about the hotel, about Jonathan's life, about how much had changed. Lucas, now 11 years old, was with Catherine. He'd grown into a confident, kind boy who volunteered at homeless shelters and food banks, his mother's values deeply ingrained in him. As they were leaving, Lucas tugged on Catherine's sleeve. "Mom, is that the mean man who yelled at you that day?" Catherine looked at her son, then at Jonathan. "That was a different person, honey. This is Jonathan. He made a terrible mistake, but he learned from it and became better. That's what matters." Jonathan knelt down to Lucas's level. "Your mom is right. I was very mean to her and to you that day. I said horrible things because I thought I was better than other people just because I had money. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Your mother is one of the best people I've ever known, and I was too stupid and arrogant to see it." Lucas considered this seriously. Then he held out his hand. "It's okay. People make mistakes. Mommy says what's important is learning to be better." Jonathan shook the small hand, his eyes wet with tears. "Your mommy is very wise." Catherine's story became somewhat famous in business circles, though she tried to keep it quiet. But word spread about the billionaire heiress who had been mistaken for a beggar and had bought out the man who insulted her. Some people thought she was too harsh, others thought she was brilliant. Catherine didn't care much about either opinion. She used her fortune to create programs for single mothers, providing job training, childcare assistance, and educational opportunities. She built affordable housing in neighborhoods that had been forgotten. She renovated schools in poor areas, making sure kids had the same resources as children in wealthy districts. She created a foundation that gave interest-free loans to people trying to start small businesses. And she never forgot what it felt like to be judged, to be dismissed, to be treated as worthless because of how she looked or how much money people thought she had. Every decision she made was filtered through that memory. Would this help people who were struggling? Would this give dignity to people who had been written off by society? Would this make the world a little less cruel? 10 years after the incident on Rodeo Drive, Catherine was honored at a charity gala for her philanthropic work. She gave a speech that night that resonated with everyone in the room. "A decade ago, a man threw money at my feet and told me I was nobody," Catherine began. "He judged me based on my appearance, my clothes, my weight. He decided I had no value because I didn't look like his idea of someone important. He was wrong, but he wasn't unusual. Every day people make those same judgments. Every day someone looks at another human being and decides they don't matter based on superficial criteria." She paused, looking out at the audience of wealthy donors and business leaders. "I could have used my inheritance to destroy that man and forget about it. But destruction is easy. Building something better is hard. I chose hard. I chose to create opportunities for people who had been dismissed and underestimated. I chose to prove that worth isn't determined by bank accounts or dress sizes or social status. The audience applauded, but Catherine wasn't finished. That man who insulted me learned a valuable lesson, but not because I destroyed him. He learned because I gave him a chance to see the world differently, to understand what it's like to struggle, to recognize the humanity in people he used to ignore. And now he's helping other people learn those same lessons. Jonathan was in the audience that night. He stood up and applauded with tears streaming down his face. Several people recognized him and knew the story. They watched as this man who had once been so arrogant, so cruel, stood and publicly honored the woman he had wronged. After the gala, Jonathan approached Catherine one more time. I just wanted you to know that not a day goes by that I don't think about that moment on Rodeo Drive. Not because I'm ashamed, though I am, but because it changed my entire life. You could have crushed me and walked away. Instead, you taught me how to be human. That's a gift I can never repay. Catherine smiled gently. You repay it every day by treating people with dignity, by running that hotel with compassion, by teaching your staff that every person matters. That's all I ever wanted. Lucas, now 16 years old and volunteering with his mother's foundation, joined them. He had grown into a thoughtful young man who planned to study social work in college. Mr. Whitmore, I'm glad my mum gave you another chance. You've helped a lot of people. Jonathan shook Lucas's hand. Your mother taught me that everyone deserves another chance. Everyone deserves to be seen as a full human being, not a stereotype. I try to remember that every single day. Catherine's foundation continued to grow. 20 years after inheriting her father's fortune, she had given away more than half of it to causes that mattered. She built hospitals in underserved areas. She funded research into diseases that primarily affected poor communities. She created scholarships for students who didn't fit traditional molds of success, and she never forgot where she came from. Even though she could afford any luxury in the world, Catherine still shopped at discount stores sometimes, still took public transportation occasionally, still remembered what it felt like to count every penny. She taught Lucas to understand both worlds, to appreciate privilege while never taking it for granted, to use resources to help others rather than to elevate himself above them. Jonathan, meanwhile, eventually opened his own small hotel with money he had saved and a loan from Catherine's foundation. It was nothing like the empire his father had built. It was a modest boutique hotel in a working-class neighborhood with reasonable prices and staff who were treated like family. Jonathan lived simply in an apartment above the hotel, his days of mansions and Rolls-Royces long behind him. But he was happy, genuinely happy. For the first time in his life, he was proud of what he had built because he had built it with his own hands, his own effort, his own changed heart. He employed single mothers when he could, giving them flexible schedules and childcare assistance. He hired formerly homeless people and gave them a chance to rebuild their lives. He ran his business the way Catherine had taught him, with compassion and dignity. One day, Catherine stopped by Jonathan's hotel unannounced. She was in the neighborhood visiting one of her foundation's projects and decided to see how he was doing. She found him in the kitchen helping the cook prepare lunch because one of the staff had called in sick. "You're cooking now?" Catherine asked with amusement. Jonathan looked up and smiled. "Everyone here does a little of everything. We're a small operation. No job is beneath anyone." He wiped his hands and poured them both coffee. "How are you? How's Lucas?" They sat in the hotel's small cafe and talked for an hour. Catherine told him about Lucas's plans for graduate school, about the new community center her foundation was building, about all the lives being changed by her programs. Jonathan told her about his guests, about the family whose car had broken down and who he had let stay for free until they could afford repairs, about the woman escaping domestic violence who he had given a job and a safe place to stay. "You've built something beautiful here. Catherine said, looking around the modest but welcoming space. "Your father would be surprised." "My father would be horrified," Jonathan corrected with a laugh. He thought success meant dominating others, accumulating the most wealth, having the most power. "I thought that too once, but you taught me that real success is measured differently. It's measured in how many lives you improve, how much kindness you put into the world, how much dignity you give to people who have been denied it." Catherine reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You learned well." When Catherine died at the age of 78, her funeral was attended by thousands of people. Wealthy business leaders sat next to single mothers she had helped. Politicians sat next to homeless people whose lives she had changed. Jonathan was there, now 74 years old, still running his small hotel, still living the lessons Catherine had taught him. Lucas, now 46 and running his mother's foundation, gave the eulogy. "My mother was mistaken for a beggar once," he began. "A cruel man humiliated her, threw money at her, told her she was worthless. That moment could have filled her with bitterness. Instead, she turned it into a catalyst for change. She used her pain to fuel compassion. She used her power to elevate others. She proved that our worth isn't determined by how others see us, but by how we choose to see others." He paused, looking out at the diverse crowd. "My mother's greatest revenge wasn't destroying the man who hurt her. It was transforming him into someone who now helps others. It was building a world where people are judged by their character, not their appearance or bank account. It was showing us all that kindness is more powerful than cruelty, that dignity matters more than dollars, and that everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves to be seen as fully human." Jonathan wept openly during the eulogy, thinking about the obese single mother he had so carelessly dismissed 40 years ago, never imagining she would become the most important teacher he would ever have. After the funeral, Jonathan approached Lucas. "Your mother saved my life," he said simply. "I was a terrible person heading nowhere good. She could have destroyed me and been justified. Instead, she rebuilt me. I owe everything I became to her." Lucas hugged the old man. "She would want you to know that you saved yourself. She just gave you the opportunity. You did the hard work of changing." Jonathan nodded, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I hope I've made her proud." "You have," Lucas assured him. "Every person you've helped, every kindness you've shown, every moment you've chosen dignity over dominance, you've honored her legacy." The foundation Catherine built continues to this day, now run by Lucas and his own children. They carry forward her mission of helping people who have been overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated. They remember that their grandmother was once judged harshly and treated cruelly, and they work to create a world where that happens less often. And somewhere in that foundation's offices hangs a photograph. It shows a simple bench on Rodeo Drive where, decades ago, a billionaire made a terrible mistake and an obese single mother sat with quiet dignity. Below the photo is a plaque with Catherine's favorite quote, "You never know who people really are. Ooh. Treat everyone with dignity, because the person you dismiss today might be the one who changes your life tomorrow." Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever been judged unfairly based on your appearance? Or maybe you judged someone and later realized how wrong you were? Share your story in the comments, because these experiences teach us to look beyond the surface and see the humanity in everyone. And if this story inspired you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that remind us that dignity, kindness, and second chances can transform lives in ways we never expect.